Thanks, Mel. I will just share my presentation here. Let me know if you can see that full screen, hopefully.
I'm kind of seeing, yep, that's perfect there.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, well, thanks everybody, and thanks to the good folks at Agromart for asking me to speak on this topic. Um, so yeah, I think we'll dive right into it. So although we're coming up to spring and we're definitely starting to think about what kind of management and things that we need to be doing during the upcoming growing season, I think that winter wheat IPM or integrated pest management really starts in the fall. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about first. First thing you want to do is consider your field history and your rotation. So um, when I'm talking about field history, I'm thinking about any diseases that you would have had in a cereal crop in the past that might be an issue again in the future. It could also be weeds that you're looking at and thinking about which ones have been the biggest issues, and all of that information is really going to help you figure out the best way to manage your current crop. Rotation is also going to be really important, especially when it comes to that disease piece. So if you're going from cereals into another cereal, or from corn into cereals, or from cereals into corn, those are going to be kind of your biggest risks when it comes to disease management in that rotation, because there are some diseases that will pass in between cereals and cereals and corn. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, though, so I won't get into that right now. The next thing you want to consider would be your cultivar choice and any resistance or tolerance that that cultivar would have to the diseases that you are concerned about. So the Atlantic Recommending Committee for Cereal Crops is the body that kind of approves, I guess, or objects to the registration of cereals for the Maritime region or for the Atlantic region. So in order to be sold in the Atlantic, cereals like a cereal cultivar has to be registered here. And what the Atlantic Recommending Committee bases their object or do not object on is fusarium data. That's the number one thing that we're looking at. So when you think about cultivars that are bred out west or are commonly used out west, they're in a much different climate than we have here. It's much drier. Their fusarium risk is a lot lower. So when the Atlantic Recommending Committee is looking at that fusarium data, they want to have it from eastern nurseries. So that would be Ontario, Quebec, or the Maritimes. So the maritime evaluation sites themselves, the variety trials that we do every summer, there's 5 sites across the Maritimes, 2 in Nova Scotia, 2 in New Brunswick, and 1 in PEI. And they actually look at disease ratings for common diseases as well. So this table here is just a little, oops, sorry. Here we go. This table is a little excerpt from the most recent cereal guide. And you can see circled at the top there, we have powdery mildew, septoria, rust, fusarium, and then also there was a dawn rating for this year's work as well. So not every disease gets rated every year. It's only really if it's present. So you can see at the bottom here, the number of station years that are being reported here. And fusarium, there's 3 years being reported because that's one that we look at every single year. So by looking at those tables, you're going to be able to see which varieties, how they performed against different diseases in the conditions that we had in these trials. The other things to keep in mind for in the fall or pre-plant would be just using clean seed and treated seed. Clean seed, so it's going to be free of weeds or other contaminants, and treated seed is going to help against any of your soil-borne or seed-borne fungal diseases. What I really want to get into now is fall weed control. So fall herbicide timing, I think, is such a great fit for winter wheat. And the biggest reason for that is because of the flexibility that it gives you. It's flexible based on the different types of weeds that you might have available or might have in your field. So it's great for perennials, things like dandelions or scentless chamomile. And that's because during that fall period, those plants, those perennial weeds are getting ready to overwinter. They're getting ready to, they're trying to pull in as many resources as they can so that they can go dormant over the winter and take off the next spring. So if we can spray them at that time, then they're also going to be pulling in that herbicide as well as all the resources that and the energy that they're trying to preserve. So that's going to be that's a great timing to be able to try to target them to kill them. The other ones are winter annual weeds, so something like chickweed or Canada fleabane. Those are things that are going to be germinating and emerging throughout the fall. And weeds are always the easiest to kill when they are small and actively growing. So fall's the perfect time to deal with things like that. The other way that we have a lot of flexibility with fall herbicides is the actual application timing. So starting with pre-plant, that it could be up to 7 days before planting that you would apply these products, and they're going to be your soil applied products. So things like group 14s, which would be Aragon, which would have a little bit of burn down, or it would have a lot of burn down actually, and a little bit of residual effect. Volterra would also be a residual product that would fall into this category. And then you have some group 14 and 15 products such as Focus and Fierce. So if you can mix those residual products with a burn down like glyphosate, then you're really covering a lot of bases in the fall and really setting yourself up to start with a nice clean field for that winter wheat crop. Our next timing would be pre-emerge. So maybe you just didn't have time to get in there 7 days before planting to get your weed control done, but pre-emerge right after planting up to 3 days, you have the time then. So those are still going to be some of your soil applied products, not all of the ones that I just mentioned, but the labels are pretty clear on that. And then lastly, if you didn't have time at all for those soil applied products, then there are still several groups that are available for use post-emerge, but in the fall. So things like Buctril M, Infinity, and Simplicity. Then we're going to move into spring herbicides, would be your next window of control, and the decisions that you have to make and the timing there. So I think that setting yourself up really well in the fall is the best way to go, but obviously sometimes the conditions don't warrant that, or for whatever reason, you can't get in the fall. So you still have the option to go in the spring and get things controlled at that time. The weeds that you want to be concerned about in the spring are the ones that are already established. So the ones that were the perennials, or the ones that were germinating throughout the fall. Because those are the ones that are going to really affect your yield. The newly germinating weeds in the spring should do very little to really impact your yield, especially if you have a nice strong stand that's going to compete really well against weeds. So the question you want to ask yourself is, do you need a spring herbicide application? If you haven't done one in the fall, I would say definitely yes. If you have done one in the fall, I think it gives you the opportunity to evaluate what's there and what's going to work, what's going to make the most sense based on your other management. So consider what other sprays are going to be happening, whether you're going to go in with an early fungicide or something like that. Is it worth adding another pass if you're concentrating on fungicides later in the season? Those are kind of some considerations there. Also, it gets into, is this a spray because on more of a cosmetic side, so you don't want to see the weeds there, or is it going to be something that's going to impact your harvest or your ease of harvest? So if you have great big weeds growing, obviously that can gum up your combine, make it difficult if you are using the straw, baling and using the straw. So just thinking about the reasoning behind that herbicide application as well. All right, I'm going to get into diseases now. And the first thing I want to talk about is Pythium, which is a root disease. So conditions for development for Pythium are cool, wet, and compacted soils. So if we think back to fall 2023, when before planting winter wheat or right around planting winter wheat, we had cool, wet, potentially compacted soils, especially if you're on a heavier clay type soil. So that's going to be really kind of perfect conditions for something like Pythium or other seed-borne um, seedling diseases. When does it show up? It's during the seedling stage that you're going to see the biggest impact from this. And so that could be in the fall at planting, or it could be early in the spring. So these are, you can see the field here that I took a picture of, and this was severely infected with Pythium. And it's kind of characterized by those weak or dead patches. And it could definitely be mistaken for winter kill, but it's going to be it definitely in areas that you wouldn't expect to see winter kill. So if it's not in those low-lying areas or places where you saw water pooling or ice forming, then that's kind of a trigger to say, maybe it's not winter kill, maybe it's something else going on here. These pictures that I have at the bottom here of the plants, the ones on the left are pretty green looking, pretty healthy, a decent root system. The ones on the right are definitely more stunted, they're yellowed, and the root system does not look as healthy and extensive, and that's really indicative of something like Pythium. Now, unfortunately, once you actually see this in the field, in the spring, there's not a whole lot you can do in that particular year. But that's where your seed treatment and seeding conditions really come in. So your seed treatment is going to help protect against something like this. Paying attention to seeding conditions. If you are going in hoping to plant winter wheat and it's really wet and cold, and you know you have a history of Pythium issues in this field, then maybe that's an opportunity to go for a spring cereal instead of a winter cereal and hopefully try to avoid some of that pressure. Okay, I'm going to talk about leaf diseases next. And before I get into it, I just want to say, I guess, why leaf diseases are so important and protecting against them is so important. Often we'll see leaf diseases on the lower leaves, and that's obviously that's where they start, and that's where they can move up the plant. However, the most important thing, as we know, to protect is the flag leaf and the penultimate leaf. The flag leaf itself is responsible for up to 75% of your yield. So keeping that as healthy and as green as possible for as long as possible is really going to be of benefit to you. So powdery mildew is one that we see fairly regularly. Moderate temperatures, 15 to 20 degrees, and humid conditions. So, spring in Nova Scotia. The other one that really impacts this is a really dense stand. So if you're somebody who is really intensively managing your wheat crop, then you're probably going to have a pretty dense stand, and that is going to be more conducive for powdery mildew development. You get a lot of plants packed into one area, and there's not a lot of airflow. And so it really makes it a really great environment for that. It's going to show up, powdery mildew is usually the first thing to show up, which makes sense because it's kind of at those more moderate temperatures, not necessarily super warm temperatures. So scout for this in the spring during tillering and up through stem elongation to see how that pressure is progressing and if it's moving up the plant. In terms of targeting management for timing, this is one that you might actually want to consider a spray at a fungicide spray at T1. So that's going to be your first to third node. Because this is one that if it does move up the plant and get onto that flag leaf, and it can even get onto the head as well and be quite severe. That being said, your fungicides at flag leaf are absolutely also going to target powdery mildew and help protect that leaf. The other things to take into consideration would be just managing your plant stand and nitrogen management. So if you're seeing early in the season, you are seeing quite a bit of powdery mildew in your crop, then you may want to pull back on your nitrogen just a little bit because more nitrogen means more foliar growth, and that's going to be denser and more conducive for powdery mildew. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is septoria. Conditions for development for septoria would be prolonged, cool, and wet conditions, so fairly similar. It shows up in the spring. Scouting for this is really important during stem elongation because you want to see if it's really moving up that plant, and that's going to depend on the weather conditions. Also, rain is a big one for septoria because it will actually splash the spores from the lower leaves up the plant. So for this one, we're definitely targeting management at flag leaf timing, but also seed treatment because it can be a seed-borne disease. So that seed treatment is going to help minimize any of the seed-borne aspect of that. The last leaf disease or diseases, I guess, that I want to talk about are the rusts. This isn't something that we have to deal with every year in Nova Scotia, but 2022 was a really bad rust year for parts of the valley and up around the Truro area. And we did see stripe rust for, I think, the first time in Nova Scotia. So that's definitely something we want to keep an eye on. There are a couple of different kinds of rust. There's a leaf rust. Both of the pictures that I have here are actually stripe rust. You can see that the pustules form in quite a defined stripy position, whereas leaf rust is a little bit more random. It's all across the leaf. So conditions for development for leaf rusts are quite warm, above 20 degrees, and definitely humid conditions, as most of these ones. The interesting thing about rusts are that they can show up anytime, and that's because, well, leaf rust in particular isn't overwintering here, or we don't think it is anyways, so that it's coming in on storm currents from the south. So there has to be time for that in the south for those diseases to develop and start to sporulate and then get picked up by the wind and moved here. So it's one that's going to show up a little bit later in the season, and it's also going to show up on those higher leaves, the flag leaf and the penultimate leaf, and maybe not on the lower leaves because it's coming in on the air. So those are the ones that it's going to hit first. It is most severe under favorable conditions at flag leaf to flowering, and which, you know, just makes sense because we want to protect the flag leaf and the head. So targeting management, again, this is kind of a tough one because we can't necessarily predict that we're going to get rust in any particular year. Certainly if you had rust the year before, in case it's overwintering, it's best to be alert and aware of that. However, our fungicides that we are applying at flag leaf for other diseases are absolutely going to target some of the rusts as well. So kind of built-in protection if you are spraying for other things. The other thing for rusts would be managing alternate hosts. So for stripe rust, just the one in the pictures here, barberry is required for it to complete its life cycle. So barberry can be an ornamental plant. So making sure that you don't have any barberry around and that it's not going to be able to complete that cycle. Okay, then I'm going to move into probably everybody's least favorite topic, which would be Fusarium head blight. Conditions for development of Fusarium head blight would be warm, 22 to 27 degrees, and very humid conditions, wet weather during flowering. So if we think back to 2023, when we had very high Fusarium pressure in our cereal crops, flowering would be around early July, early to mid-July. And what was happening at that point? It was warm and it was raining nonstop. So it's no wonder that 2023 was such a rough year for Fusarium infection. So it does show up at heading. You can see in my photo here, this premature bleaching, that's really indicative of Fusarium head blight. And then as it matures and as the plant matures, it turns into this photo on the right here. So you can see the little black fungal spores, and even it's a little blurry, but this orange fungal growth here as well. So target management for head diseases is going to be at 75% head emergence to 50% flowering. And I think it's always best to be a little on the front end of that spray window, because so 75% head emergence, that's when 75% of your crop has the head fully emerged. So all the way out of the leaf sheath, you can see a little bit of the stem there right at the bottom. So when 75% of your crop has reached that stage, I think you want to get in as soon as possible, because things are going to move fairly quickly after that. And just because of the way winter wheat flowers, because of it's a very subtle flower. So it's easy to kind of mistake how far along that flowering period is. So if you can get in there at the front of that spray window, I think that that is your best option. Other management for Fusarium is going to be crop rotation. So I mentioned earlier about being able to pass between cereals and corn. And that's because the Fusarium fungus actually has two stages. So it has an asexual phase, which is Fusarium, and a sexually reproductive phase, which is Gibberella. And so those will pass back and forth between wheat and corn. So if you have those following each other in rotation, then it's definitely an opportunity for that disease to keep a foothold and impact your next crop. Residue management, definitely going to be important here. So with cereals, your Fusarium damaged kernels are going to be these small, white, shriveled little kernels. And so more often than not, those are going to get spit out the back of your combine if the air is turned up a little bit. So that's great for your grain sample. However, it's not great because they're staying in the field and acting as inoculum going forward. An issue that some people ran into a little bit last year was that the crop was so poor that it maybe didn't even get harvested. And that's another really big issue, because then we have all of that residue in the field acting as inoculum. And at that point, really the only thing you can do is to bury it and to plow it in, which I know a lot of people don't do much plowing these days, which is great for soil health and all that, but it might be the best option to deal with any infected residue that you may have left. This is a really cool table that I pulled from the University of Guelph, and it's just on yield response to fungicide timing. So looking at 1, 2, or 3 applications at the 3 different timings, T1, T2, T3. So if we look at one application at T1, very little yield response there. So they had 1.6 bushels per acre, which is about 44 kilograms. That's definitely not going to pay for your application. So if you look at kind of the more common ones, so just T3 and T1 and T3, are about 8 to 9 bushels, which is about 200 to 250 kilograms. So then we're talking like a quarter ton per acre. And that starts to look a little more attractive. I would say that the T2, T3 would be our most common combination. So that's your flag leaf and your head spray. And 10.8 bushels per acre translates to about 300 kilograms. Then we don't see a huge jump. It would be about 300 kilograms to 350 between the T2, T3, and the full 3 applications. So just kind of an interesting thing to think about, because obviously we want to increase yield as much as possible and pay for those sprays through yield. The last thing I want to mention is just some tools that can help. So a lot of different provinces have like a fungicide or a fusarium prediction tool. And up until this point, that's not something that we've had available and validated for the Maritime region. However, Adam Foster, who is a researcher at AAFC in Charlottetown, has been working on this for the past several years and has developed a web tool that's going to help predict fusarium head blight risk. So you input your crop, the date, the region, and it's going to pull data from weather stations to be able to help predict the fusarium risk. So that's really exciting. That's going to be available. It's supposed to be available for this growing season, and it's going to be through the Atlantic Grains Council website. So stay tuned for that. And with that, thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for questions, but if not, feel free to contact me at my contact information there. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was great. We actually do have time for one question, and we have one here in the chat.
Great.
So the question is there value in disease management to using a certified treated seed versus bin run?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there. And one is going to be this seed treatment. If you can't treat your seed yourself, which most people can't, then that is definitely an advantage to buying certified. It's also going to decrease your any weed seed content. Yeah, the certified seed has to go through a pretty rigorous process so that it has as little disease or weed impact as possible. So there's definitely an advantage there.
No, I agree. And is fusarium getting worse? If yes, why?
I wouldn't say it's getting worse. I think that, I mean, last summer we just had the perfect conditions for it. So it was definitely very prevalent. I think we've always had fusarium pressure, and it just shows up in different areas in different years. It just all depends on the conditions. But one thing you can bet on is that we definitely have the inoculum here. And we usually have the conditions. So I would say fusarium is something that you always want to be paying attention to, definitely.
Perfect. Well, that's great. I think we'll end it there. Thank you, Caitlin, for your time and for presenting. It was very, very informational.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. So now we will, up next, we have Scott McCarthy. And Scott is with Bayer Crop Science. And Scott is going to talk about Bayer products for grain. So are you good to go,
I
Scott?
should be good to go. Let me get the slide going here, and I will share my screen.
Perfect.
All good, Mel? Can you see it there now?
I think it might be just loading.
Mhm.
I'm going to just see your all your slides.
How about that?
Oh, yep, that's perfect. Thanks,
All right.
Scott.
Perfect. Thank you, Mel. I guess thanks to the Agromart for inviting us to come and talk about our products here today. I guess I'll just kind of quickly introduce myself to the group. I'm new to Bayer. I started with Bayer back in mid-November last fall. I'm from PEI, so I'm the kind of the new Bayer rep in the Maritimes. Graham Kempton's still working with Bayer. I'm going to be looking after the DeKalb seed line and the row crop products. So I live in PEI. I've worked in the past 10 years or so in the retail world. So looking forward to my career here with Bayer. So with that, so just kind of after Caitlin's presentation, I'm just going to talk about our Bayer's portfolio of products for that will help out with plant health, disease management, Fusarium head blight control. So it's kind of keeping the disease level low and maximizing potential yield in the overall disease management. So just kind of run through. I'm going to kind of go through 3 different products that we have: Stratego Pro, Delero Complete. Those are our T1 and T2 fungicides that are used for control of the leaf diseases. And then we'll also talk about Brezero Pro here later on, and that's our Fusarium head blight T3 timing fungicide. So our first product is Stratego Pro. So it's a broad spectrum systemic fungicide for the control of some labeled diseases in cereals, which kind of cover off all of our leaf diseases. Delivers industry-leading yields that maximize farmer profitability and superior disease control. So what it consists of, Stratego Pro is it's a group 3 and a group 11, and both are active on the leaf surface, and they're absorbed through the cuticle. They penetrate plant tissue, and the group 3 also is transported through the vascular tissue. Just kind of again, whatever, both are active on the leaf surface, they're absorbed through the cuticle, and the prothioconazole, which is group 3, is transported through the vascular tissue. So just a little bit, it's registered on barley, wheat, oats, and winter wheat as well, with a rate of 230 milliliters per acre, which turns into about 30 acres a jug. Kind of just recommendations here just on all water volumes. Keep the water volume higher, better. You'll have less chance of any kind of burning or anything. Rain fast in an hour, re-entry time 24 hours, and just some pre-harvest intervals on it for 45 days for the grain, straw, or hay. 30 days for foraging or grazing. On this here too, one application per season on the spring. I guess on the winter wheat side, it is 2 applications. So here, just look at the broad spectrum of leaf diseases that it's covering. I'll not go through all of them, whatever. Caitlin did in her presentation prior, ran through all of them, but just kind of how they're critical, and then on the different staging and the timing. So this covers off the blotch, the rust, powdery mildew, all the different tan spot, everything like that. So it's gives you a good broad spectrum of leaf diseases. So the next, so that's our first T1, T2 timing fungicide. So our second one, it's a newer fungicide, Delero Complete. So what exactly is Delero Complete? So Delero Complete is basically, it has two groups of two active ingredients, a group 3 and group 11 from Stratego Pro, and then added in a group 7 fluopyram, which is commonly used in some of our other horticultural products as well. So it gives you more consistent disease activity, and it gives you another mode of action that increases the greening effects. That's so that's kind of it. So here's the 3 different groups. So the group 3 moves relatively slow through the plant, but has a longer residual than most group 3 fungicides, and it gives better post-infection properties than any group 7 or group 11. Group 11 is a broad spectrum, molds, mildews, leaf spots, rusts. It has some plant health characteristics. And the group 7 is highly mobile in the plant with some residual protection. Works different than the group 3, disrupting spore germination. Has some physiological and greening reaction in the plant, leading to improved light energy harvesting, and it's ideal for high disease pressure situations in crops. So that's why it's used like that in Luna, Tranquility, and Propulse, which is in their horticulture and for dry beans. So Delero Complete is also used or registered on corn and soybeans too, kind of for the broad spectrum on the leaf diseases in the corn, and for white mold on the soybeans. So it's got a broad range of crops. This here just shows a few different characteristics, and with the 3 different modes of action, you get activity on a couple on 2 of the for the most part 2 of the actives. So just on preventative, curative, systemic movement, additional movement ability, plant health and greening, and residual. So it kind of gives you a very broad range of these characteristics. So just kind of the key messages from it. So of Delero Complete, has 3 different modes of action for a consistent broad spectrum and consistent disease control in cereals. Unique chemistry combination will lead to consistently higher yields. So just the kind of the rates with it. So a jug does 237 milliliters per acre. So a jug does 30 acres on cereals. Again, keep the water volume to 20 gallons, just to help with any kind of potential burning or anything like that with it. Again, broad spectrum systemic fungicide, delivering excellent disease control of all major leaf diseases. And I'll just kind of go another slide, what Caitlin talked about already, just the broad spectrum of diseases that it controls for leaf diseases. And here, just again, similar to the Stratego Pro, just kind of with the extra active, it gives you that little extra control. So that's just kind of our 2 different leaf disease fungicides. Timing wise, depending on what you're going after, either your T1 in the earlier stage or your T2 on flag leaf, both of these will provide you with some excellent control. So the next product I'll talk about is Prezero Pro. So this is our T3 timing fungicide for Fusarium head blight. It also will give you some leaf disease control too, so I'll kind of get into that a little bit here. So basically, what is it? So Prezero Pro has 2 group 3s in it, which was the Prezero XTR previously. So then we also added in the group 7, the fluopyram. So the first group 3, the prothioconazole, moves relatively slowly through the plant, but has a longer residual than most group 3s. It has better post-infection properties than group 7s and group 11s. And this is the Fusarium powerhouse in the product. The other group 3 moves more quickly through the plant with a shorter residual than most of the other group 3s, and it has some good rust activity. The group 7 is highly plant mobile with some residual protection. It works different than the group 3s, disrupting spore germination. It has some physiological and greening reaction in the plant without impacting maturity, and it's ideal for high disease pressure situations in crops. So this just kind of runs through the diseases. So it does all the major leaf diseases, gives you control on that. And then what the true applications for is for the suppression of Fusarium head blight and ergot. So it sets the standard in delivering ergot, Fusarium head blight, and leaf disease protection. It's got an effective multi-mode of action with 3 powerful active ingredients, and provides exceptional protection in high disease situations. So it's the Prezero Pro is designed for the wheat and barley grower looking to maximize return on investment. Delivers exceptional protection of Fusarium and reduces DON levels. It was the first foliar fungicide registered in Canada with ergot on the label. Provides all the major leaf diseases, control on all major leaf diseases, and it's a multi-mode of action containing 3 powerful active ingredients, 2 group 3s and the group 7. So it delivers a healthy green crop without impacting maturity. So just kind of the formulation rates and packaging. The 3 different actives, they're different rates per hectare, or active ingredient per hectare. The application rate is 20 acres per jug, comes 2 jugs per case. It's a suspension concentrate, and it does, which is very important, does require the addition of a non-ionic surfactant. So just make sure you're following the label rates with that to give you your proper protection. Water volumes, minimum of 10 gallons, rain fast in an hour. And just, I guess I'll have a few slides just on the timing, which is, I guess, the most challenging part with controlling Fusarium. So for wheat, for this suppression of Fusarium, you have to apply Prezero Pro as a preventive application when at least 75% of the heads are fully emerged, to when 50% of the heads on the main stem are in flower. Application at this timing also will control for some leaf diseases. For barley, the suppression of Fusarium, you have to apply Prezero Pro as a preventative application when at least 70 to 100% of the barley stems are fully emerged 2-3 days after full head emergence. And again, it's always going to err on the side of caution. I know it's not a perfect world, but if you can touch earlier, you'll get better control. And again, on barley too, you'll get some leaf disease control. So just the slide again, or whatever here. It's a very tight window for proper application. So just a few slides, just a few visuals. Again, 75% of the heads fully emerged, up to 50% flowered. There's an optimal window there, and as longer you go past it, the less economical and agronomic benefits you'll get. So there's just a couple, there's all kinds of, I guess, timing guides and everything. These are in our row crop guides, I guess, on our product guides on our books. So just on barley. So although there's generally a 7-day application window of application, that indicates that growers who apply their fungicides early between the day +1 +3 gain the greatest return on their investment. So as you can kind of see here, this is kind of the timing or the lead up to it, or whatever. So the earliest stage of application window is at day 0. So that's when, just as heads are 70 to 100%, 70% emerged. Begin applications if future spraying conditions are forecast to be less than ideal. So it's better, again, just to kind of go, when in doubt, hedge on the early side. So again, you kind of have your 3-day window to apply. And then as you get into day 4 plus 4, 5, 6, it's less of an economic benefit. So in wheat, again, 7-day window of application or window to apply it. And growers who apply the fungicides between day 1 and 2 gain the greatest return on investment. So just on that, so it shows at day 0, 75%. So that's kind of your starting point. 75% of the heads are in the main stem should be fully emerged. Again, if conditions in the forecast conditions in the coming days look poor for applying, hedge on the early side. So optimal time, heads fully emerged, flag leaf when first flowers visible. So you have a two-day window. So as you go farther down the road, you have less of an economic and agronomic benefit. So I'll just run through a few different slides just on some trials, market development done. So this is just on their ergot management. It was the first foliar fungicide with ergot on the label. So this is just over 7 different trials a few years ago. An untreated check versus Prosero Pro, and it's a number of ergot bodies in 1 kilogram seed per sample. So as you can see, there's a definite reduction in that there. And just a visual with it, you can see the ergot bodies in the sample on the right. That was the untreated check compared to the sample treated with Prosero Pro. Again, some more trials done with looking at the reduction of DON levels in spring wheat. So an untreated check, 6.2 parts per million with Prosero Pro, 3.5 parts per million. So this is over 16 different trials. Definitely shows a reduction in levels. Just another one for a non-treated check versus Prosero Pro for wheat yield. So this is the Prosero at the head blade timing. So over 32 different trials, and 67.5 bushels on non-treated and 73 Prosero Pro. So it's definitely showing the economic benefit of applying Prosero at the head blade timing. So these are just a little bit more recent multi-year trial. So kind of just compiled all the data over 3 years for some field scale trials, just in comparison to some of our competition in this market. So we've there's three different charts here. So I'll just kind of highlight each one. So over 53 different sites, Prosero versus the competition on yield trial wins is very consistent. We're holding our own in this market for Fusarium head blight, which in turns to yield. So we have slight advantage on the Dawn trial wins on the middle chart, and this is what we're consistently seeing on the bigger scale or whatever. Is the Prosero Pro is giving a lower grain moisture with compared to the competition. So over 53 trials, we had 35 wins on that. So that's where we're keeping it green, keeping the plant green, healthy, the disease out, but not affecting maturity. So just some small plot trials that were done last year. So 11 different trials. We're just looking, Caitlin kind of had a similar graph to this too, just on the different timing of the fungicides and the yield response. So kind of an on-tree check. So it's just showing the T1 timing, so T1 and a Fusarium head blight timing, and then just a Fusarium head blight timing between us and some of the competitive products. So as you can see, there's definitely increase to or yield increase by doing kind of the full package with our products holding our own in the marketplace. So that's kind of it on the products. So I got a couple minutes left. I'll just run through our Bayer Value East Rewards program. So the Bayer Value program is, you'll hear a reference to many of the Bayer Value. This is Bayer Value East. It's registered with the Bayer Value program. You have to be registered before July 31st. If you were registered last year, automatically get registered. And there's just a number and stuff and a website just to show that. If you're looking for more detail on it, I'll kind of run through it quick. So there's a trait match. Kind of it consists of 4 different components. There's a trait match. So if you buy a corn or soybean seed with a Bayer trait in it, you can match your CP acres up to that. You can also get rebates on the unmatched CP acres. So if you're just buying Bayer CP products and no corn or soybean with a Bayer trait, then there's a Roundup product focus and a field view reward. So I'll just kind of run through it here quick and keep everybody on schedule. So basically with the trait match, so if you buy a minimum of 100 acres of a Bayer trait and a minimum of 1,000 of any of our Bayer branded brands below, you'll get a rebate per acre get on this. So if you buy 100 acres of DeKalb seed and you're buying Prosero Pro as well, you get $3.50 an acre on all the Prosero up to 100 acres. And then over and above the 100 acres, if you buy up to on the unmatched acres, if you buy a minimum of $5,000 of Bayer products and minimum of 2 products, you get the reward on that. Just if you have Field View, if you're a Field View user and have an active Field View subscription and qualify for Bayer Rewards program, you'll get 50% of your subscription back in your rewards. So just kind of a highlight on the traits that we have. So it's all the Bayer traits, DeKalb, and some of the others. It doesn't include the Corteva or Syngenta brands. And it has a acre conversion. So a bag of corn is 2.5 acres and soybeans is 0.74 acres is what we use for consistency. For the crop protection products, it also runs into standard rates depending on what rate. So just kind of a few examples here for our calculations. ProLine's 30, your Sencor is 75, DF is 10. So just kind of that. And just to highlight the Field View, if you have a subscription, you will cover 50% of the cost on as a rebate. So there's also calculators that you can look at to show what kind of rebate you potentially get. So that's something that you can always reach out to myself or whatever, just to compile. So that's kind of it for our products. I guess just kind of any comments, questions, or anything like that, we can go from there.
Great. Thank you, Scott. I don't think we have any questions in the chat, but
yep.
Nope, I think we're all good for it now, but thank you very much for going over the products and giving us a little update and seeing what's available.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Just before we move on to our next speaker, if you're collecting pesticide points, we ask that if you could change your name so that it shows like what it would be on your pesticide license. Or if you can't change your name, if you could just message us and let us know what your name is on here Zoom and then what your name is on your pesticide applicator's license. It just helps for when we're taking attendance and making sure that you're getting your points for being here with us today. So with that, is Adam, are you ready to go there, Adam?
Good morning.
Morning. So we have Adam Viper on with us today. Adam is from Bayer Crop Science, and he is going to be giving us a European corn borer update.
Thanks for the opportunity here. So I guess for those who probably don't know me too well, Adam Pfeffer, I'm with Bayer, been with the company for about 16 years now. I'm based in Ontario, Southern Ontario. I operate a small cash crop farm as a side hobby, I guess. And my role with the company is a market development manager for all things corn and soybean related. So try to stay in touch with most activities across the country with regards to those two crops and help our market development team here in Canada execute protocols, research on germplasm, traits, herbicides, fungicides, seed treatments, agronomy, pretty much the whole portfolio. And with our group, really trying to bring our R&D pipeline to the commercial growers. So the trials that Scott will be helping with this year from a germplasm standpoint, variety showcases for the brand. We have last few seasons worked on our seed treatment program in the Maritimes with the Poncho 500 and tetraniliprole or diamide combination there. So we'll have some more trial work with regards to that this coming year. And certainly happy that Scott's able to help out with that stuff. But the last couple of years, European corn borer is certainly becoming more of a focus. And I jumped in really with the Canadian Corn Pest Coalition last year in focusing more on this pest. And I know you guys have certainly been dealing with it for many years. It's a pest that in Ontario, as a child, I remember dealing with this one, broken stalks, purple plants after the nutrient flow gets cut off. But really, I haven't largely seen European corn borer challenges in my professional career until I went out east last year, last August, September. And yeah, the pressure you guys are dealing with, not just with corn borer, but with corn earworm, Western bean cutworm, certainly some corn rootworm as well. Yeah, it's an interesting situation. So, working with our folks in the insect IRM group and the Canadian Corn Pest Coalition, after, seeing what Jocelyn Smith, Caitlin were working on and seeing out there. And then Jocelyn's discovery of a Cry1F, Cry1AB, so a Acremax traded product, failing in the Truro area back in, I think, 2021 or 2022. The 2022, sorry, that field was identified. I think it was just right close to the Agrimart location down the road. I know we went for a brief tour last summer late and checked out the neighborhood, and we didn't see too much action. I think that particular field was replanted to carrots, which is good. But once that Cry1F, Cry1AB, so the dual traded product, showed some feeding challenges. It really became apparent to myself and others within Baird that we need to do a fairly broad scouting efforts endeavor. And this past year we did work with AgCall on that. So I'm sure some folks here on the phone might have received the call. Certainly we had some training with our Agronomy partners and our other seed dealers from other brands in the marketplace in the Maritimes last year. And really our goal with that scouting program was to understand where the pest was, the distribution, the intensity, and certainly if there's any cases of feeding on traded plants was really our main focus. And the traded space can be very busy and cumbersome, tough to wrap your head around. And I can maybe endeavor to clarify that a little bit too. So within the Baird trait platform, really in the Maritimes market, it's either Roundup Ready traded product or what we call a VT Double Pro product, which is two proteins, Cry1A 105 and Cry2AB2. But again, two traits, and all those hybrids are sold as refuge in the bag. And we've had that trade in the marketplace for a number of years. We will be looking actually at an 82-day Tricepta product, which Scott will have in his trial program this year, which brings in the Viptera component for Western bean cutworm control. But again, the Double Pro trait is really the backbone of our trait portfolio in the Maritimes maturities. Everything's refuge in a bag. So if you open a bag of seed, you'll see the purple seed. That'll be the 5% refuge, and then you'll have the green and treated seed, which is the traded product. So, you know, when we moved to refuge in a bag, it really ensured that each field was having some refuge plants within it. I know refuge in the past has been a challenge to keep track of, you know, planted in strips or blocks or using neighboring fields. And I think that's certainly led to some challenges as well with this pest and other pests as well. So let's, again, VT Double Pro is really the backbone of our trait offering for your maturity. And you'll see that trait prevalent in Maize X Pride, Pickseed, a number of different companies. And then from a Corteva, Pioneer, Brevant standpoint, it'll really be Acre Max, which is the Cry1F, Cry1AB traits. And that's what you'll see in the Acre Max. There are some Chrome products as well in some earlier maturities where you get into some rootworm protection. But the predominant trait will be that Acre Max product with that Cry1F and Cry1AB. And that's really kind of the first place I'll start. I'll just share my screen here if I can figure out which one to share. Back in last year, I asked Jocelyn Smith, she's an academic at Ridgetown College, to share a map. Let me know if that shows up for you, Mel, or if I grabbed the right screen. Oh, maybe I haven't done it yet.
Oh, no, there you go. That looks great.
Okay. So this map is something that Jocelyn Smith put together back last year. And this was before the Cry1F, Cry1AB. But you can see the red boxes here. So there's one in Manitoba, one in Quebec, and then a number throughout Nova Scotia, and certainly in your neighborhood, a number of fields were identified. So these Cry1F populations had a resistance ratio of greater than 10. So that means it took more than 10 times of a regular dose of BT protein before they discovered 50% of the population to die from that. So that's really just a way to say that these red boxes are populations that did show a high level of resistance. The green triangles, you can see a resistance ratio less than 2.2. So these were populations that they had identified with a little bit of tolerance, I would say, to the BT protein. And you can see those distributed through the Maritimes. One population here just around Ridgetown College in southern Ontario, and then here in Manitoba as well, a few populations identified. And then Cry1F susceptible strains, so they were able to grab samples to compare against. But this was really the story in 2022 after they were able to complete a lot of these screenings on these populations. And I would say COVID, certainly the travel restrictions, this problem was first identified in 2018 with the first population of Cry1F, but then certainly COVID happened and we really lost 3 years of scouting, sampling, and understanding where this pest is. And when Jocelyn and her team at Ridgetown were able to get back out and work with Jason Wells in New Brunswick and Caitlin in Nova Scotia and get these samples, it really became apparent that the issue was wider spread than it was in 2018. So, that's kind of a bit of the backstory. And then, as I mentioned, in the fall of 2022, they sampled a field right in the same neighborhood as the branch there, just on the north shore of the Bay of Fundy, or a finger of the Bay of Fundy. They sampled a population of Cry1F and Cry1AB, so a dual traded product for European corn borer control, which really should be not possible from all the models that companies have developed over the years. But it happened, and it is happening. So those discussions happened really this time last winter with Canadian Corn Pest Coalition, and really got my headspace to a point where this is a serious issue. We need to have a more thorough look at this pest. So we did that. That's a bit of the background, and certainly if anybody has questions, please stop me. But what we did last year, and this is just a PDF, and I'll skip down to the maps that we looked at, and I'll focus specifically in the Maritimes. So, excuse me. So we enlisted with AgCall. I think there was 5 or 6 scouts spread across Canada, and one in Prince Edward Island. We had a couple folks in and around the Truro area, New Brunswick, and then we had somebody based in Western New Brunswick. And really our goal with this program was to scout traded fields, see if there's any insect feeding in those fields, and then if there was, identify if those plants were refuge plants or if they were traded plants. And you can see on these maps that pin coloring is fairly straightforward. Green pins, we didn't find any evidence of European corn borer feeding. So you can see the province of Prince Edward Island, our scout really didn't find any activity. That's not to say that they're not present. Just where we were looking, we didn't come across any. So that's encouraging to see. But certainly we're going to continue this program going forward and get another set of eyes on that island as well. And then in New Brunswick, you can see in the western side around, I think this is the Florence, Woodstock area. So, not much pressure, really. Fredericton West. Our scout there didn't identify too much. And then you can see around the Sussex region, Salisbury, and there's a zoom in on this Sussex region. This is really where we discovered some challenges late in the season. So in the yellow pins here, these are fields that had European corn borer present, but those plants that had damage were non-traded plants. So the refuge plants doing what they're really designed to do. And then here's the Truro region, and then down the Annapolis Valley here. Really didn't find much activity, which honestly was a bit of a surprise. We did do a training here just south of Truro, and we were able to find larvae feeding on refuge plants within that traded field, but largely didn't find too much action there. But the Salisbury area, or sorry, the Sussex region, there's a sentinel plot which Jason Wells managed right here at Newton, just off 890 with a dairy farmer. And there was observed injury in all traded products in that field. So everything that's available in the marketplace was in the sentinel plot. Some trait versions were on sweet corn, others were on silage corn. And we did observe some feeding in, I think it was a Mazex trial right beside there. We did see some feeding in double pro traded hybrids there, along with the Pioneer products that was planted in the headland. So we doubled back in this neighborhood. We did find one field just north, about 5 miles northwest of that sentinel plot, that we did find one plant with one larva in it that was still alive. So we did find some issues in this neighborhood. You know, I won't sugarcoat it. There is certainly an issue in this region with all traits in the marketplace, and it's certainly going to be an area that we're going to spend quite a bit more time in this coming season. So yeah, and unfortunately with this pest, you know, the traits that we have available today are really, from our pipeline standpoint at least, the traits that we're going to have available to us by, you know, really to the end of the decade. There are a few other proteins that are in the pipeline, but they are a number of years away. So this is a challenge that we need to stay on top of. The other thing I'll mention is Connecticut. The same sentinel plot was ran down in Connecticut with an academic, and they did see some feeding, not to the same extent that we did in this trial area, but we did see some feeding in that trial in Connecticut. So it's not just isolated to the Maritimes. Jocelyn was out in the Ottawa Valley as well, and she observed a larva within a plant. And just to give you an idea of the level of injury in this Sussex region, this is the sentinel plot here. So you can see traded sweet field corn here in the background, which had some issues. This is a non-BT sweet corn, these rows here. And you can see Jason Wells here. We've already been through this plot collecting plant samples, but this is a double pro traded sweet corn variety that saw a fair amount of feeding. And then a neighboring field, this is a non-BT field here around the provincial trials that Jason managed, and you know, virtually 100% of those plants had multiple larvae in them. So then this is really what the tunneling looks like when you split open a stalk, and what causes the yield loss and stalk breakage issues is the larva tunnels through that stalk and really cuts off the nutrient flow up and down that plant. So that's really what the challenge is, and this is a double pro traded product around that sentinel plot. So it certainly has our attention. We're going to go back at another scouting program this year. We're certainly going to double down in regions where we saw it last year. So certainly for this group of folks here, you may be contacted later this season or mid-season to set up some scouting areas and trying to keep an eye on where this pest is and some of the management practices that can help reduce population. You know, one challenge with European corn borer is it flies, it moves, it travels. Unlike corn rootworm, which really stays in the place that it's born and raised, it'll move a few miles. European corn borer will move, you know, 40, 50 kilometers in a flight. So you can have population spread fairly quick. And that's really, one of the main concerns with this one is um, how far it can travel and spread throughout not just the Maritimes or the Eastern Seaboard, but really throughout North America. So I think we're a ways away from that, um, but yeah, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what we learned in our scouting program last summer. So Mel, I don't know if that covers off what you're hoping for. We can talk some management ideas as well if we want, or if
Yeah.
anybody else has some questions.
No, I think the management, like what can growers be doing to kind of help with Eastern corn borer in their fields? Is there things that we should be looking for ahead of time or management, crop rotations?
Yeah, I think certainly rotating crops will help, but really the main source of management is stock destruction in the fall. These larvae will overwinter within the corn residue, within the corn stalks, and we really find them migrating down towards the crown of the plant. So where your roots are anchored in the ground, you'll find larvae will survive in overwinter in really that butt stalk. So we're going to start some research, or the Canadian Corn Pest Coalition this year, looking at different stalk shredding techniques. One that's worked well in the past has been a flail mower. So I think those are present in and around the countryside, but a flail mower really destroys that stalk, that crown, that root ball, and really just want to break it open. So you allow the frost, the moisture, bacteria to get at those larvae. And that can have a significant reduction in the population. So spring or fall, the larvae usually pupate and emerge late May, mid-June, late June timeframe. So if you have stocks that aren't touched and you have an issue, you can go out there and scout, as soon as the snow melt, grab some plants with a knife. Be careful that you don't cut yourself, but just split them open, and you can identify those larvae fairly readily. They've got black heads, kind of cream colored bodies. You'll find them in that bottom foot of the plant. But really that stock destruction, a speed disc, if you're doing a grain head, chopping corn head would really destroy any material above the stalk rolls. But from a silage harvest, really, you're just concerned with what's left on the field at the bottom end of the plant, right? So
Yeah.
that's really the primary method to slow this thing down. We're never going to eliminate it, but I think we can certainly work as a collective industry to identify the hot spots and try to get some mitigation measures in place. And that's one area that I want to keep working on. Is can we get some of that stuff coordinated through groups like Caitlin's, Jason's group, provincial specialists, soil and crop organizations. Can we get some kind of neighborhood watch programs going with this pest, and certainly those that have dealt with it firsthand, how injurious it can be, yield loss, stock lodging, all that stuff, right? So it can be a big pain in the butt.
Definitely. We have another question here in the chat. Does European corn borer have any other host crops other than corn?
That's the challenge. It has hundreds of host crops. Potatoes being another one. A lot of cold crops, ornamentals. And I think that's part of the challenge in the Maritimes is, yes, there's corn, pockets of corn. There's certainly lots of potatoes around. But yeah, it's been able to thrive. We haven't had the density of corn, traded corn, to really beat this population back, in my opinion, in the Maritimes. And those alternate host crops allow it to survive and build those populations and increase the selection pressures. So yeah, certainly, foliar insecticide applications have a limited effect because once the corn borers within the stalk, you're really not going to have any impact on insecticide. But yeah, certainly there's many hundreds of host crops that European corn borer can reproduce and survive on. So it's a challenge. It's not just a challenge in corn production, potatoes, peppers. One of the biggest concerns is getting it into the greenhouse peppers down here in southern Ontario and impacting, that export market, because those larvae can survive in there too. So it's an interesting pest.
Definitely. And I guess the last question we have here is, there are new traits on the way that will help in corn borer?
Yeah, no, and I touched on that briefly from our camp. Unfortunately, we're not going to have the trait, before the turn of the decade, which it's already 2024. So, we do have some traits in the pipeline, and we are striving to get those into the Maritimes region in 2025 to have a look at in these heavy pressure situations. But I would say, from a biotech trait standpoint, there's not going to be a silver bullet anytime soon from industry on this pest. So I really think it's going to come down to cultural practices, flail mowing, tillage, anything we can do to make their overwintering habitat uninhabitable. I've even joked, take a flamethrower through the field, burn the residue. Can you bale it up and use it as bedding? Yeah, anything we can think of to make their overwintering home inhabitable. That's really, I think, where we're going to have some success with this one. So.
No, that's great. I guess I'll open it up. Does anybody have any questions that's on the session right now? If not, I guess we'll end it there. But thank you very much, Adam, for taking the time and for going through this update for European corn borer. It's definitely something it's going to be on our minds in the upcoming season and then moving forward and what we can do.
Yeah, for sure. And it's unfortunate that it's happened. But kind of one of my tagline expressions I always use, regardless of herbicides, insecticides, Mother Nature her job is to adapt and survive. And unfortunately, these populations have adapted to the BT proteins. And yeah, we're going to have to think about other creative ways to manage this pest for sure going forward. So appreciate the time. And yeah, if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to Scott or myself. We're happy to answer those and look forward to getting back out later this summer and looking for this pest and eating some fresh Maritimes seafood. So very much looking forward to it.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Adam.
All right. Thanks, Mel. Have a good day.
So I guess Doug and Eric. Hi there, Doug.
Good morning, Mel.
Morning. I guess if you guys are ready, we can, are you guys good to start?
Yeah, you betcha. I'm not sure. Eric's going to try and call in. We'll see how that works. I know he's got some other stuff going on today. So good morning, everyone. My name is Doug Helm. I am the Enogen Technical Sales Lead for Syngenta Seeds. I'm responsible for the Enogen technology across Canada, and then specifically day-to-day of the Ontario region as well as the Maritimes. So really excited to be on the call today. I'm going to try and share my screen here, Mel, and I will apologize. I'm not always the most tech savvy person, so hopefully we can make this work today. How's that look on your end?
That's great, Doug.
Wonderful. Great. So I'm going to talk to you today about a few things. We're going to talk just some Enogen basics. Where we'll talk a little bit on research. We're going to spend a bit of time talking about some below ground insect products, as well as some traits and maybe some hybrids if we have time in the end. So when we look at normal specialty or very popular specialty feed, products, or livestock nutrition as a whole. We generally think that if we can get more dry matter into our livestock, therefore we can use that to drive production. And the nice thing about Enogen hybrids or the Enogen technology is we look at that differently. We believe that we can add production to your operation without adding additional corn or additional feed to your program. So some real basics on Enogen, what it is. What we've done is we've been able to identify some amylase enzymes that were found around a marine vent in the Atlantic Ocean, and we specifically went after 3 different enzymes that were selected due to temperature control. So enzymes that could survive in a very, very, very cold and a very, very, very warm temperature. And we're also able to find one enzyme that was very, very tolerant to different pH ranges. So a very alkaline to a very acid environment. And taking those 3 different enzymes, breaking them apart, and then engineering them back together to make a super enzyme, or an alpha, so an alpha amylase. And then what we were able to do was embed that new alpha amylase enzyme into the starch portion of corn. So making Enogen corn somewhat different than other corn hybrids that are specific for cattle production is we're not going to talk today a lot about fiber digestibility, or maybe that floury type technology. We're going to talk about grain corns and feed efficiency based off of an additional starch digestibility. Why do we do that? When we look at corn as a whole, a corn kernel is made up of about 75% starch, give or take. And when we look at corn silages, about 45% of corn silage is made up of starch, or if we look at that as a dry matter basis, about 35% of the overall product. So when we look at, adding additional digestibility to that starch, we look at getting a feed efficiency improvement, or getting more meat or milk per kilo or pound of feed consumed. So the idea there, lowering feed costs for both beef and dairy producers, giving that dairy producer the ability to fill their quotas with milking less cows, or on the feedlot or cattle side of things, lesser days on feed. So just some real basics. Starch being a complex carbohydrate made up of very, very tightly linked together glucose molecules. What Enogen hybrids do, or what that alpha amylase does, is it very, very quickly and efficiently takes that starch molecule, which is a relatively large molecule, and breaks that down into small fragments and simple sugars. We know now that complex carbohydrates are converted into volatile fatty acids in the rumen by rumen microbes. Those volatile fatty acids are then delivered to the liver and convert those back into glucose or simple sugars. And that's where energy in our feed comes from. So that glucose is used to produce both milk or beef. So again, with Enogen, what we find is that enzyme is speeding that process of converting starch to sugars faster and better than other corns, providing more rapidly available energy for every kilo of food produced, therefore giving us a feed efficiency bump. So we're going to talk a little bit about beef and just some trial work that was done. I like to use this slide simply because it does show consistency of results. So if we look at the 3 trials on the left-hand side of your screen, these are all grain-fed cattle, and the 2 studies on the right-hand side being silage-fed cattle. And we'll go through this stuff relatively quickly, but the first study on the left-hand side, the green bars in these graphs representing cattle being fed Enogen, and the black bars being cattle being fed conventional corn silages of similar maturity. So this particular ration, this work was done at Kansas State. The ration consisting of dry rolled corn and whole shell corn, making up almost 29% of the ration. What they found was a 5.5% feed efficiency advantage And if you look at the bottom of underneath that slide, dry matter intakes tended to be somewhat lower in the Enogen fed cattle. And we tended to see about a 2.5% advantage in average daily gain. And we did see net energy maintenance and net energy gain of those rations, excuse me, increased by 4 and 6%. And then going across to the next, University of Nebraska Lincoln study that was done again on dry rolled corn, making up 60% of the ration for a finishing ration. And we saw that 5.7% advantage in feed efficiency. No difference in dry matter intake, but we did see an increase in average daily gain of 6.5%. And then those Kansas State cattle from the first study we looked at were finished off on steam flake corn. Again, didn't see any difference in dry matter intake, but we did see an increase in in average daily gain. And I think again here the important message is whether the cattle are being fed flake corn, rolled corn, whole corn, as long as the rations are compared consistently to conventional fed cattle, we're still seeing that 5.5 to 5.5% improvement in feed efficiency. The silage fed cattle, again, we see similar results. Kansas State did some backgrounding cattle using a ration of 40% silage. We see a 4.5% improvement in feed efficiency. Again, very little difference in dry matter intake, but we did see an increase in feed efficiency. And then the final study here, those Kansas State cattle being fed out on an 8% silage and steam flake corn ration. And again, we see that 5.5% improvement in feed efficiency. So again, we won't spend a lot of time laboring on these beef numbers. Again, the reason I like to use this slide is it does just show that consistency and performance. So just to do a little a summary of a bunch of these, there's a bunch of different work that was done, but Enogen corn has shown an improvement in digestibility, performance, and feed efficiency in beef cattle when compared to conventional corns. So those feed efficiency gains again around 5%, but in across all the studies that are being done, we've seen results from 1 to 9%, and have seen an actual really nice reaction in total tract digestibility. Large reductions in fecal starch. And when we looked at Enogen hybrids and being fed out using a life cycle assessment study, looking at different environmental factors, Enogen corn did show a 5% reduction in different compared to conventional fed cattle on things like greenhouse gas emissions, land usage, water usage, and the usage of hydro. And then looking at economical modeling on those beef studies, cattle fed out 7 to 12 days less. Again, when looking at cattle comparatively fed with conventional corns and not taking into consideration feed cost savings and yardage. So just, if we can look at, what that costs per head per day to keep those cattle for 7 to 12 days, there's where we're finding our economic returns. Okay, we'll move on to dairy. I did throw a dairy study in here. Again, we're not going to belabor looking at a lot of numbers today, but just wanted to show some efficiency. So this being a Penn State study, again, if we start at the left-hand side, we'll go to the bottom, the design of the study, 48 cows in a freestall, fed on Gatling gates, so controlled fed cattle, 6-week study. The TMR being fed made up of 40% corn silage on a dry matter basis, and all they did was they switched out the Enogen corn silage for a conventional. And what they found performance-wise was a milk yield advantage to the Enogen fed cattle of about 5.5% or 2 kilos per head per day. Energy corrected milk around 3.5%. And as we looked at dry matter intake, we're basically the same. So those cows were able to produce more fluid milk and eating the same amount of feed. So when we look at feed efficiency, we did see again that 5.5% or 5.4% improvement in feed efficiency on fluid milk, or still 3.5% on energy corrected milk. And then when we looked at that methane emissions or the greenhouse gas side of this, there was a 7.5% reduction in the grams of CH4 produced per kilo of milk. So then I guess to look at the bottom other results, what we did see was, again, there was no difference in dry matter intake. There was no effect on rumen fermentation or rumen pH. Interestingly enough, in both the beef and the dairy studies, we also did not see any increase in volatile fatty acid production, and did not see any negative effects as far as acidosis or additional ketosis events. And again, no negative effects on milk components. So we do see a 5.5% improvement in milk production. We did see our components stay level or increase in the studies that have been done. So that's the work there. Again, a summary here. Enogen silage has shown to improve performance and feed efficiency in dairy cattle. The studies that have been done, again, that range coming back 4 to 10% improvement in fluid milk production. So in the average herd, we did see increases in milk of 2 to 3 kilos per day, with no loss in components or in body condition scoring. Again, when we looked at that, the environmental impact, the LCA showed that we saw similar to the beef, a 4 to 6% improvement over conventional corns in those key factors. So greenhouse gas emissions, land usage, water, and electricity. And then when we looked at the economic modeling, Dr. Randy Shaver out of Wisconsin, and I've been working trying to get a model built that would use, a formula that would take into consideration how we get paid for our milk here in Eastern Canada. So we did see benefits on return on investment, $20 to $22 per cow per month, or for the entirety of the lactation. Or for on an annual basis per cow, around $240. And again, as I said earlier, giving you the ability to meet your quota by milking fewer cows. Moving on, we'll talk a little bit about silage quality. So there's a few things that come up with Enogen silage as guys feed the product out. So one thing that we do hear from producers that tend to feed or have had to feed green silage or silage earlier on is that we don't see the same rumen upset and feed rejection that we would normally expect to see in cattle fed non-fermented silage. So the study that was done, they looked at the digestibilities of Enogen silages compared to, again, comparable conventional silages starting on day one. So again, we're looking to start at the left-hand side of this graph, looking at in situ starch digestibility. And what they found was that Enogen corn silages on day one were already showing a 19% improvement in starch digestibility over non-Enogen corn hybrids. And we can follow that graph across still at day 7. So partway through fermentation, we see 15%, 13, 12. When we get out to day 60, we're still seeing a 9% improvement in starch digestibility over the conventionals. But the really interesting thing on this slide, if we look at day 157, yes, we still see a 7% improvement in starch digestibility, but it's on day 157 where the conventional silages got to where the Enogens were on day 1. So halfway through the year, halfway through the feeding period, we're starting to see those conventional silages being fermented long enough where we can see the same effect as what we saw from the Enogen silage on day 1. Now, out of day 240, we still see a 5% advantage in starch digestibility in the Enogens. And now this study's been carried out, to over 400 days, and we still see that 5%. So yes, as silages ferment, we do see the gap narrow, but once we get to that 250-day mark, that 5% gap stays in place, and we see that carry on through. So in some of the marketing that you'll see, especially out of our American team, it says feed Enogen first or feed it when you need to. Again, as you can see by this chart, we are seeing the greatest effect in the first half of the year, but also seeing that 5% advantage all the way through the feeding period. So when we look at some other things that we're hearing from producers, one thing is we don't hear of any type of heating or reheating on Enogen silages. So they looked at Kansas, they did a bucket test or standard bucket test on several different silage samples, and what they were trying to figure out or trying to prove was aerobatic stability. So how long does it take silages once they've been reintroduced to oxygen to reach 2 degrees above ambient or air temperature? And in this particular study, what they found was Enogen corn silages stayed cooler for 42 hours longer. So there was a 42-hour increase in aerobatic stability. Where this comes into to play is it does lead to less spoilage, but also when we look at feeding Enogen corn silages through the later part of the feeding period, so through the hot months of the summer, what we're finding is those silages feed out cooler and stay cooler in the bunk, and maybe not seeing the same amount of feed rejection as you might see in a conventional silage. So a couple other things that they looked at was spoilage, and what we have identified is that we see less bunk spoilage on Enogen hybrids compared to conventionals. And part of the reason for that, when they tested silages through the fermentation period, is that there was about a 12% advantage or increase in the amount of acetate being presented or produced during fermentation. And acetate being a natural preservative found in corn, this is basically a very complicated way of describing vinegar, but it's a natural preservative. So and we'll see this in a lot of different high-end silage inoculants. You see things like bucknerite and acetate. So Enogen silages, because of those sugars are fermenting quickly in the bunk, we're seeing an additional 12% being produced there. We also saw a 30% reduction in the amount of ethanol being produced during the fermentation period. Lower ethanol levels generally being an indicator of less yeast, and yeast being a leading cause of spoilage in corn silages and a leading cause in ingredient degradation or breakdown of nutritional value of silage. So again, some side effects of how the product ferments. We are seeing some really nice numbers when we look at things like improving overall fermentation, but again, stability and less spoilage on these Enogen silages. Okay, so I've worked in ag sales for about 30 years. Salespeople are really good at telling us the good stuff, everything that we like to hear. I do consider myself to be relatively honest at times, or I try to be. So I'm going to tell you some of the watchouts, because every product has watchouts. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Enogen corn silages or corns are an IP crop. They do require a grower contract, some field mapping, some requirements for equipment clean out, and in some cases border rows. The whole purpose here is just to make producers aware that the Enogen corn that they grow has to stay on farm and has to be fed to cattle. The product is not to be delivered to a grain elevator. So we're asking, growers grow what they need for feed. The product is not available for export, or not approved for export. And it does cause us some issues when we look at things like food production and how it would flow through a food plant. So that's that. It's not a complicated contract, and it's definitely not a big holdback for producers, but it's just something I wanted to make you aware of. Secondly, dry cows and heifers. We need to be mindful when feeding Enogen corn or corn silage to heifers and dry cows. The Enogen technology works every day. So whether these calves are in hutches or we're looking at high performance lactating cows, the enzyme works in those silages. So if we're not making an energy adjustment to our dry cow or heifer rations, if they're being fed Enogen, we are going to end up with some fat dry cows potentially, and potentially some overweight breeding age heifers. We know that fat dry cows are traditionally more so to be dead dry cows. So we just need to work with our nutritionists and make sure they're aware of what we're doing. One other thing that we do see in almost all of the herds that switch from conventional silages to Enogen, we do see a reduction in MUNs. So if you're a herd that would normally run in that 10 to 12% MUNs, we will see those reductions, somewhere down in that 8 to 9. Nothing to be concerned about. It's just simply a matter that the cows are making better use of fed protein due to the extra energy being digested by those cows. But just, every fall, we do spend a lot of time talking to veterinarians and nutritionists because we do see that drop. And then the last thing that I wanted to make you aware of when we're comparing Enogen corn silages to traditional corns, and you send that to your lab or with your feed wrap, and they're using either NIR or wet chemistry to test your feed samples, you're not going to see any advantage of the enzyme. The product requires both an increase in moisture and an increase in heat to activate. So when we look at it, something like NIR, where we're simply shooting a laser into that sample, the reflection of that laser does not translate out or does not show the effect of the enzyme. So we really do need to use an in situ process, or actually put those samples inside of a live cow to see a reaction. We are working on some modeling that would allow us to easily, translate a traditional silage sample for with your nutritionist. So make it easy for them, but they are not going to see it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the Enogen value tracker. When when we go to shows, we talk to producers. Everyone likes to talk about the fact that Enogen is purple corn, and in a sense it is. So 5% of the corn, or the BT refuge of Enogen, will show like these ears on the bottom right hand side. It's just a visual effect for either receivers at grain elevators, at ethanol plants, just that there's something there that they maybe want to take a look at and probably shouldn't have at their plant. But it is a really big conversation piece. I've had jars and ears of corns disappear continuously at shows. They're beautiful. People really do get attracted to these purple ears. Okay, I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about, before I'm out of time here, a little bit about some traits and different stuff that way for Enogen. I'll skip through this slide. So all of our Enogen hybrids do come with Syngenta's Duracade rootworm protection product. Duracade giving similar or equal control for corn rootworm, or actually any of these insects that you see listed here, very similar to what we would expect to see from either Chrome or Smart Tax Pro. But it is a unique product from Syngenta with some new multiple source of action. So very, very good rootworm protection with Duracade. When we look at things like seed treatment, the product is available to growers with 2 different seed treatments. Fortenza Complete being our insecticide, fungicides, and biological treatment. So the Fortenza being the insecticide, Maxim Quattro, Vibrance, and Viantis as the fungicides, and Draco being a biological from Syngenta. Draco helping with early season emergence, root development, and can lead to some stress relief during dry growing conditions. The other option being Viantis Extra, which is basically the same product without the Fortenza insect control. So again, Viantis, just simply a fungicide, and the biological. So very, very good product for things like Fusarium and Pythium. Excellent for root health and vigor. And again, Draco is a dual strain biological for stress relief and better water use. And Fortenza, again, exactly the same coverage as what we would see, but with the Fortenza insecticide for control of wireworm, seed corn maggot, and cutworms and chafers. One thing that I did want to talk about today, and I don't know if Eric Richter has joined us from our crop protection team, but Syngenta is able to offer Force 3G herbicide product that is an option for any additional below ground insect control in areas with history of pressure. We know that through the maritime region, there are different areas or sectors where we do see some real early season wireworm and seed corn maggot issues. Force 3G being a long-standing product has shown really, really great control of black cutworms, corn rootworm, seed corn maggot, and wireworm. The product is a synthetic pyrethroid, so it's a soil applied. It does go on using your insecticide boxes on your planter. Um, it's uh, it's not a systematic product, so it's not through the stalk itself. And then we look at things like pre-harvest interval for forages, 49 days, but what we're looking at for corn, so harvest 56 days after the corn is being planted at the year, and that's our early harvest interval, and then restricted entry. So we ask that once Force 3G has been added to a cornfield, that we do not re-enter for 12 hours. A couple other little notes. So as I said before Force 3G is applied in furrow with the seed at 2 to 5 centimeters deep. You can apply Force 3G through your planter mounted insecticide applicators with a band applied ahead of the planter's press wheels, and again at that 1 to 2 centimeters. It's recommended that you use wind guards when using to ensure that we're putting the product in the right places. We ask that you don't apply Force 3G by air and avoid when there's rain in the forecast. When we look at rates of 3G, we're looking at 2 kilos of Force 3G per acre, or 1 bag of product will treat 10 acres. Again, this is not a product that we recommend for all of your corn acres, but definitely in any of those areas where you see a lot of pressure from ground insects, definitely an option for you to use. So we're going to talk just really, really briefly about corn hybrids. We have 3 or 2 available this year that would be applicable for your region. We have an 80-day, so the EO 80Q1D has a very strong performance in highly productive soils. This is a big plant, upright leaves. It's early flowering, works really, really good in a varying degree of different populations. So down as low as a 27, 28, and does perform really well if you're in a higher population situation, more in that 36,000, and does work really, really well on corn acres. And the final one, we do have an 85-day, which is very good for your region as well. This is a new one to the lineup this year. It's very tall corn silage type product, and it has shown good results in multiple different growing environments. And that's that. That's what I had today. Please, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to help, or if Eric's on and you have questions about 3G, hopefully he can help me out. Thanks, Mom.
Perfect. Thank you, Doug. We actually do have one question here in the chat.
Great.
And it is, would you still suggest using an inoculant with the Enogen corn silage?
Yeah, and it's an excellent question. So I come out of the feed business. That's my background. I'm a big fan, and I believe that if you use an inoculant and it's working for you, absolutely you should. I do also believe that there is probably a conversation to be had about using maybe not a Bucknerite or a preservative-based inoculant, but spending those dollars on a really, really, really good bacterial inoculant, and I think we can probably get a very similar result and maybe save a little bit of money. But absolutely, I think every ton of corn silage or high moisture corn needs to have an inoculant of some sort go on it, for sure.
Perfect, thank you. And I guess I'll open it up if there's any other questions from anybody. We do have a few minutes. If not, And I don't know too if Eric joined, but no, I don't think so. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I got connected.
Oh, perfect. I don't
Good
know.
talk there, Doug. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I hope I didn't butcher the Force 3G part of that too badly, Eric.
Nope, we're good.
Okay. Lovely. Well, I guess we'll thank you guys very much for joining in and giving us an update on Energen along with the traits and products. We really appreciate your time. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. I really appreciate it, Mel.
Awesome. Great. So we have one more presentation here today, and that is Jason Ado. Is Jason there?
No, it's Josh.
I'm sorry, Josh. Sorry.
It's all good, no problem.
So we have Josh here. He's going to be talking about commodity markets 2024. So if you're ready there, Josh, I can hand things off to you.
Perfect. So just want to say thanks, Nick, for inviting me off this. So if anybody that's not familiar with me, I'm Josh. I work for Parrish and Heimbecker. We ran a soybean export program out of Halifax this last harvest. I think it was pretty successful. We were able to move about 30,000 tons of PI and Nova Scotia beans into the world market. It was a good enough program that we were going to continue that program this year. Unfortunately, values aren't quite where they were this time last year. And I told Nick I'm probably not going to make too many friends with this talk here because I don't see too much upswing or many opportunities to get back to those values. And Dustin Gamble here just joined me. He's our corn trader. So just a little bit of insight on what's kind of going on in the world in terms of soybeans to kind of help you guys make your decision on what you think might be the best plan for you and your farm. Canadian exports year over year projected to be up slightly, mostly due to the West Coast increase. Not much, still 5% though. Global stocks expected to increase around 20 million tons, mainly due to increases in Argentina and Brazilian crop that's smaller than last year, but still substantial. So you're looking at like a total South America crop to hit the world at like around 220 million tons. Like that's substantial. Carryout is going to be the widest since 2019 trade war with China and expected to grow around 400 million bushels with like 3.9 million more bean acres expected. Crush margins are cut in half. That means that the crushers aren't going to be using as much. Chinese hog numbers are down 7% year over year. Export values in Brazil, competitively, they are like how do we say this? They're so cheap right now, and it's a tighter market for them. Like their farmers aren't selling, so they have to pay more for their crop in Brazil. So once the farmer decides to start selling, it's going to be even worse for us. So what I'm trying to get across here is to maybe start playing a little more defense than hoping for another jump in markets. Like when we do have opportunities, and we will have jumps in the market here and there, be it weather rallies or some concern somewhere. I think you guys should look at that a little harder than maybe waiting for us to get back up to those $700 values. Reward the market when it rewards you. Not much more to add to that, in all honesty. The value today, we're just over $400, 430, I think, at harvest, an indication going into the terminal. You got any insight on corn?
I guess trading corn, we don't have too many friends right now. it's not an exciting market. We're trying to hit a fine window selling grain out of the lakes between Ukraine just dumping grain onto the market and the Suez Canal issue, where they're having to go all the way around Africa to send grain to Asia, just makes shipping to Asia that much more expensive. That the Black Sea is just dumping grain into Europe. So it's really making it difficult for us to find a hole between Ukraine dumping and Brazil harvest coming online. But we're hitting little ones here and there. We're not seeing a lot of action out of the river, like out of the Quebec market. Just Quebec producers are really holding on to grain. And so that's just meaning they're bringing a lot of corn from Eastern Ontario, and they'll be building their ending stocks. No matter what Ontario does, Ontario's going to be growing ending stocks significantly, like a million, at least 1 million tons year over year will be left in the bin going into next harvest, especially if harvest ends up being a bit earlier than last year. But we will get exports here and there out of the lakes, but it's a tough battle. And futures wise, it's been a downward trend for a long while here. It's very supply led. If the US plants 91 to 92 million acres, which is pretty much where every analyst put their numbers out and aligned with USDA as well, if they end up with a decent yield, say last year or better, we can be going to a carryout level we haven't seen on corn since the late 80s. So that's why Chicago futures probably have significant pressure going forward still. I guess the good news is we are getting a little rally here nearby, but I guess I would tell guys, maybe if your market is more flat price on the nearby, like we're selling corn out to guys by rail and forwards too. What we're working with guys locally is we're just telling them really the nearby Chicago futures are heavily depressed. And it's trying to hold grain off the markets in the US because they just don't have export markets. Such an excess amount of corn. But if you look at the forwards, they're in Canadian dollar terms per ton, there could be $30-40 a ton carry. Just selling stuff out there. So what we're seeing a lot, Quebec producers very much on the sidelines, very little marketing. Southwestern Ontario guys, kind of the same thing. But we're trying to tell guys like, again, Josh's analogy there, you have to be playing defense, not offense. For the last few years, we didn't play offense and the values just went up and it was very easy to market grain. Now it's pretty hard to maybe pull the trigger or write up a contract, but you got to make sure you're in a position where you're not behind and hoping the market comes back to you, because a lot of people just, look at the funds are record short and people think, maybe they'll exit and things will drive up, but there's no real reason for guys to exit too much. And them being record short is all relative because in North America, farmers kind of record long corn inventory. So longer term, there could be a lot more downside. If you see a rally and you like it, it's kind of nice to market. But in general, I guess we're trying to get guys to sell more into forward time periods at $30 to $40 premiums. Old crop and new crop are all trading the same news and the same USDA planting intentions and acreages and weather, right? So if guys are behind on old crop, we're just recommending make sure you're selling new crop and not digging yourself a big hole and getting taken along for a ride by the markets. But it's not a fun market to talk to producers about. It's not optimistic. Cost of production gets talked about a lot, but there's no way around it. Just the world is producing a lot of grain.
We took a big swing from one way to the other within like a year. Unfortunately, this is where we're at today. That's pretty much it. Is there any questions? Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. We don't have any questions here in the chat, but if anybody who's on the call right now, you're welcome to ask a few of you if you want to.
Josh, it's Nick from Churro. Just thinking with that export market out of Halifax. So there is no issue with that export market, but what we're looking at is probably a reduced price for next year.
Yeah, we're still going to run a program as best we can, but the values are not going to be close to what we were paying at this time last year.
No, and then that's fair enough. That's got nothing to do with really you or I. That's the
Yeah.
markets, right? So if we're playing conservative here and trying to book into the market, you know, to cover us off, where should we be on a percentage of coverage today?
Well, today's only, what is it? It's almost March now. If you look at historics, I say I'd like to see before or after guys get stuff in the ground close to 25% sold, just so you have a good handle on what you got in the ground. And that's like kind of the first step. At this point, if you see some rallies and you want to just get something on the books, I always tell guys that you don't need to sell your entire crop in one swing. It helps you when you can average it out, especially in a volatile market like where we're at. So just keep that in mind. Once you guys get some stuff in the ground, then start to take a better look at what you are comfortable with forward selling.
Okay, and so if we want to keep working at this, the best way to do this is to contact you directly.
Yeah, Nick, you've got my number, so if anybody wants to give me a call, just reach out to Nick, and he can give you my contact information. If that's okay with you, Nick.
Yeah, no, that's great. Any of us at the AgMart team can share that. That's really all I had. Mel, is there another call for questions there? Does anybody else have any?
Yep, I can. I'll take a look at the chat. Oh, we do have one here. With the flood of supply, do you see consumer grain prices going down from record highs?
Consumer prices. That's a whole different ballgame, right? It's kind of it's not necessarily up to.
Oh, it is remarkable to
Yeah.
see, you know, wheat drop in value, you know, 50%, and you go to the grocery store
Hasn't changed.
and you're paying the same for cereal or bread or like some of the stuff just doesn't
make any sense.
Yeah.
So it's kind of frustrating to see, you're not getting paid what you were for your wheat or corn or beans, and then you go to the grocery store and nothing's changed. That's something you got to talk to your politicians about, so they can go to the Westons and have a conversation with them.
Definitely. Great. I don't think there's any other questions here, but if anybody does, please forward them through and we get them over to Josh and his team. So I'd like to thank you guys for presenting. We appreciate the information, and it was great. So thank you, Josh.
Thanks, guys.
PNH.
Bye.
So I think that concludes our sessions here today for this morning. So we will have sessions on again this afternoon. So those will start at 1, and those will be our Hort crop based sessions, but everybody is still welcome to join in if you're looking for some pesticide points and CCA points. We also will be returning tomorrow. So tomorrow we will have our session starting again at 9, and we will be starting with Hort crops. And then in the afternoon, we'll be starting at 1:30 with field crop sessions again. So I'd like to thank all the presenters for taking the time today, and for all of you guys coming in to join us. So thank you for your support. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Might see you again at the Hort session. And before you click off here, I will share my screen for the CCAs. So they can get their points. Oh, there it is there now. So thank you, everybody.